Okay, all right, thank you. Good evening, everyone. This is the City of Port Orchard regularly scheduled October 28th council meeting, and if you would please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you and good evening. We have quite a full agenda tonight, so we'll move right along with it. The item 2 on our agenda is opportunity for citizens to address the public. I have 3 folks signed up, so we'll go through those, and then if you forgot to sign up but you still want to address the council at this point in time, then raise your hand. But Arlene Williams.
Hi, I'm Arlene Williams. I live at 1763 Bay Street. To talk about the Bay Street pedestrian pathway, sorry, my notes are on my phone. Hi, Council, Mayor. My husband and I just would like the city to respect that any homeowners who want to stay in their home and explore options to allow them to do so. We'd be interested in considering an offer from the city, but it would need to be significantly higher than the appraisal I talked about 2 months ago. The housing value has increased since January, and then several things that weren't mentioned in the appraisal was a piling upgrade that Ocean and I did to our home in 2010, and then the land value is not adequate. I told you before that the comparables was like a $5,000 landlocked lot over on Hood Canal was one of the land comparables in the appraisal. And then the land would be higher in the context of a shoreline development project and the need for mitigation being the houses over water. So look forward to hearing your discussion tonight and hopefully have a resolution tonight. The mayor, thank you for calling for that. And I charge you, council, to make your decision tonight. Pull the Band-Aid, do it.
Okay, thank you. Randy Jones.
I'm Randy Jones with Venture Charters, one of the 5 homes the city is discussing about over the last few years of taking my home away. Arlene brought up something that I wanted to let you guys know. Well, first of all, my business is growing, has been growing, to the point of now I'm looking to lease with a surgeon who has a 52-foot high-speed catamaran with the same occupancy as my 30-man boat. And my vacation rental was sold out during the summer, but this year is looking bleaker because a lot of my regulars are concerned about this pending over my head. And you're costing me money, you're costing me business, you're costing the city of Port Orchard business. It's October 28th, and I just got a call for November 22nd for 12 people coming in from Idaho. They'll be staying 2 nights, not in my rental because I don't have the room, but over at the Hampton Inn in Bremerton, and taking them out fishing in November. It's October 28th, yet I had 3 charters this weekend, brought some of my deckhands with me here today, and we worked 3 charters in this weather this weekend. Anyway, I'm looking to possibly, if I grow the business, pick up a 42 to a 45-foot boat, tri-cabin, where I could use it for lodging and bareboat rentals. So then with my apartment, I could get a dozen people in overnight. All this revenue is going to go away and go to the city of Bremerton if I stay in business. I promise you that. Under no circumstances would I stay in Port Orchard. The mayor, Glenn Jarstead, was the owner of my boat for 30 years. He was the mayor of Bremerton for 18 years. And on his last election, people said, "You're not in City Hall doing your business." Well, Glenn was out on the ocean, Secretary of Navy, Secretary of Defense, spending the whole day talking about the city of Bremerton instead of being across the desk. That got the city of Bremerton a lot of business. And that's what I'm doing now. I have been for the last year, talking about what's happening to us 5 owners. I was proud of my city. My boat has been broken into twice over the last 35 years. First time at Dick Vliss dock there, where I used to keep my little bayliner. An officer came up behind me and asked, "Are you Randy Jones?" And I kind of hesitated, said, "Yeah." "Well, we have some stuff stolen from your boat, and the guy that stole it is in our back seat." A couple years ago, if you remember, some kids vandalized down in Port Orchard, stole a boat, and took it to Blake Island. Well, again, the officers called me. They said, "We have the people that did it. We have your stuff." I'm proud of my city. I can't say that I'm even close to proud of my city right now. The fact that this has drawn on for the last 3 years is incredible. My partner came up here, and Arlene cried last meeting, and my partner came up here shaking like a leaf because he was so incensed. And Mr. Dorsey there, when you made a comment, he smiled like this, a little smirk. Is that
Excuse me,
kind of
Mr. Jones,
representation?
our
Is that
time's
kind
up.
of, I understand. But is that the kind of representation the city wants? That kind of bureaucratic smugness?
Okay.
I'm
Thank you.
incensed.
Thank you. We didn't have a person's name, but we had a letter that was provided to the city clerk, Clerk Reinerson, and the request was that she read the letter for the record. So I'm going to ask her to read that letter now.
Okay. So one of the biggest challenges facing Port Orchard is how do we become a city of value that attracts professional business, become an attractive tourist locale, and invite quality citizens looking to take up residence and engage their lives in a progressive town. There is limitless potential in Port Orchard, and tapping this potential will take dedication and sacrifice at times for the citizens and businesses currently here. The pedestrian pathway is a great step towards what is needed to create an environment that attracts the very people and businesses that the citizens have been asking for. The hardest part is taking that action and taking on the costs and sacrifices head on to achieve what the citizens verbally request, but at the same time seem to continually be unwilling to support financially and logically. In this instance, the homes in question are old and are or will be soon become a maintenance challenge for the owners, as residents over water are extremely high maintenance and in many cases an environmental hazard. I understand the upfront anger and unwillingness to concede their homes. I would react similarly in the same situation. But when I take the time to look logically at the scenario, I see an opportunity for the owners to remove themselves from high-maintenance structures and to make an extremely positive impact in progressing our city. The city does need to recognize the sacrifice by these owners and compensate them properly. However, the owners need to be realistic as well as with what their expectations are for compensation. It would be a major step back towards to not continue with the progress of the pedestrian pathway, as a very prosperous city has similar amenities to offer and entice individuals to frequent or relocate to. Our city has taken very little advantage of its outdoor opportunities to become that city which is attractive to people and businesses looking for an area that can provide a type of environment that promotes the outdoor industry, professional businesses, and quality of life. This is a great untapped potential as the area is extremely popular and currently used by bicyclists, skateboarders, runners, joggers, pet walkers, and walkers in general. The pathway tidies up our shoreline and provides an amenity that allows our waterway to be appreciated, utilized, and safely accessed. It creates an attraction that promotes out-of-town people to frequent our town, patronize our businesses, and speak highly of Port Orchard as what we have to offer. This pathway is an overwhelmingly positive step in the right direction. While eminent domain is typically frowned upon and misunderstood, it becomes a positive if the persons affected see the true advantage to all and get on board with the progression of the city of Port Orchard. Our city desperately needs to focus on projects that add Okay,
Randy, is that anonymous?
Yes.
yes,
So
There
we
was
don't
no
know who it
signature
is?
at the bottom of that letter, was it?
correct.
Okay. Any other member of the public wishing to make their comments, please raise your hand. Please, would you come up?
I'm sorry, I'm still under a shock of what I just heard, and I hope I'm not the only one. I thought we were in the United States of America, where we respect property. I became an American citizen for that reason. I discovered the eminent domain in New London, Connecticut. We've been talking about that, my husband and me, forever. I see it coming over here. I am under a shock. I cannot even say that because they start with those houses, decide that they're not good. Who's next? Who's next? We were rezoned commercial in our area because they wanted to build some, what was it, restaurants and stuff like that in our area. So we were rezoned without knowing anything. We fought one house after one house to came back to a residential. What is going on in this country? Please, what is going on? Who is for that? Who decided to take housing? I'm sorry, I am really, really upset. We are in the United, you take an oath toward that flag every time when I come here. Who decided to do stuff like that? This is Bolshevism.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else? Please raise your hand. Okay.
At this point, I would like to find out, from a raise of hands, who up there on that podium supports this? Who supports this eminent domain to take these people's houses away?
Excuse me, we're going to get to that tonight.
All
We
right.
are. So, and the council has more than once said that they don't want to be questioned or required about,
Okay, well,
so,
I
but we
wanna
will be
make sure
getting to that.
That my request is that we find out who up there is actually pushing this agenda.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else? Yes, please.
Beth Cottrell, 709 Kitsap Street, Port Orchard. I can't stay for the whole meeting, but all I can say is, those houses out on pilings have been there forever. They're part of what makes Port Orchard, Port Orchard. I don't give a rat's anything about that money that you might lose. It isn't worth taking people's property over, and it isn't worth ruining the character of this town. I walk a lot along that beach, and I know it is somewhat inconvenient past there, but I'd be happy to cross the road if you made a trail on the other side. And it's fine with me. I mean, I've been doing it for years. It's more important that Port Orchard look like Port Orchard, to me. I mean, you can't make everything new. Leave a little of what makes this town its unique self.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I see two more hands, at least two more hands, so three more hands.
My name's Dana Harmon. I live on Kitsap Street, and I'm a little distressed to hear that you're wanting to condemn homes that have been there for the history of the town. And one of them especially, I know you're talking about a small group before you round the bend, but once you round the bend, there are a couple more homes, or they're homes now, but they used to be commercial businesses. And one of them was even a predecessor for the Veterans Home. It was called the Old Soldiers Home, and it was owned by my great-grandmother and her husband. And it's where the soldiers, I have photographs of it where they have tents out in the yards because they didn't have enough beds inside the Old Soldiers Home while they were building Retzel. And A community will never have a historic value if you continue to tear down the history you have. And I agree with the previous speaker. Everything can't be new and should not be new. We need to have history in a community, and you're tearing down something that is really unique in this town. And as far as having a water walkway, why can't you go, like she said, go across the street, or they do many other things. I know there's other ways that you can continue to have a walkway that people can use without taking people's property.
Okay, thank you. Yes, please. And then there's another gentleman in the back after this lady.
I guess I'm wondering if we already know, or it's been said that the Navy Yard is not going to let the walkway continue around on their property or next to the railroad. To me, a walkway doesn't have to be on the water. We have beautiful views from this whole town. Just because it was put in a plan 20, 30 years ago doesn't mean that it has to continue in that one position. We can find other ways and then drop back down to the water. If they're going to do it past, I don't know the total route, but past Bangor or Keyport, however the waterway or the walkway has been planned all the way out to, say, Kingston, there can be alternate routes. We just have to get together and come to consensus on that. It does not have to be right on the water the whole way. And I want you to think about that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, sir.
Yeah, hi, I'm Aaron Passo.
Could you pull the mic up?
I'm Aaron Passo. I'm one of the affected property owners. There may be other alternatives. I don't well, you know, I've sort of been working with engineering, looking what they're doing. I do know that we sort of need some kind of pathway where they were going to cantilever that thing out. That little strip should probably be finished. Whether we need a combination bike and pedestrian pathway with the current 14-foot width that entails, or whether we could get away with just a simple sidewalk, would still allow for a pedestrian pathway. In any case, I would like this process to be concluded and a decision made. I'm tied up. I don't want to put money into my house and do a bunch of work on it. I can't sell it. I can't get a bank loan. The banks are aware of what's going on. I'm sort of tied up, and it's not fair to the other property owners and myself, I feel, for this process has been dragging on and on and on. And I know that election time is coming. Everybody's afraid to make a decision, don't want to stick their neck out. But one way or another, I'd like to know what's going on in my life. The uncertainty is killing me. So if there's other alternatives, great. If not, I understand that, you know, trying to walk there, I would suggest across the street, but I don't know. And then I was suddenly informed that the city owns almost all the way up to my door. When I bought the place, I was told I own up to the seawall. I put $100,000 just into pilings underneath there. Nobody said it was city property then when I applied for permits. Nothing was said. All of a sudden, the city says they own my parking area. You know, and I got permits. I got a whole history on this. And all the money I sunk in there, I guess you guys own it. If you guys own it, maintain it.
All right, thank you. Yes, ma'am. Oh,
I've been here for 10 years, with my own company for 8 years. I do work on the boats with these guys. I live on the pilings. And I'm wondering, if your guys' houses were on the water, would this discussion even be being made right now? We have so many different things wrong with this town, besides putting money in other people's pockets that it doesn't belong in, that we could be putting on streets, making our classrooms smaller, actually paying attention to our youth. Because 20 years from now, where are you guys gonna be and looking at? You're looking at the people still living here, and you're trying to kick us out. You need to be thinking about what you're doing before you do it. And look at who's writing it down and who smirks and laughs about the conversations.
thank you. Okay, yes, ma'am, and then you're right after her. No, you. Try to go in order the best I can.
Excuse me. I didn't know who was behind me. I've already spoke out against this because I don't like the idea of taking homes. But I have two questions. One is the fact that I haven't heard anyone speak in favor of this except for one gentleman that lives across the street and fully admitted that it would improve his view. That's been quite a while. And this anonymous letter. Those are the only two people that I've heard that have spoken out in favor of this. My question is, if everyone comes forth and says this is what we don't want, unless we can come up with a solution that saves the houses, wouldn't it be wrong to go forward with that? My other question is, what about when we get around the corner? Do we have a solid plan for going around the corner that isn't going to involve this same sort of activity? And if we don't know we have a plan around the corner, should we be taking houses? So that's my statement. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I moved to this town 2 years ago. I've been looking fervently for work the entire time, getting nowhere for anything because I come from a long history of bad decisions, bad choices. Regardless of the fact, I've only gotten a job in Bremerton, and that was just only for a little bit. If it wasn't for Randy right here and Venture Charters and that house right there on the water, I wouldn't be able to live here in this town. My mom wouldn't be able to live here in this town. I wouldn't be able to afford my rent, my bills. I'd move back to Eastern Washington. That would be me, my friends, and everybody else that I could bring from there over here, which is company or business for all the companies around here. And then that word is from my friends to other people over there. Word of mouth brings more company or more business for the companies around here. We don't necessarily need a boardwalk or anything around that corner because that's going to be a lot of construction and a lot of taxpayers' money. It's going to be tearing down people's houses. Some of these people I don't even know. It'd be me leaving all this, and then how are you going to get around the bend? And then we all know dang well that once you go around the bend, there's going to be more houses there. Then you're going to start wanting those. And then eventually it's going to keep going and going. And then it's just going to be business after business after business. And you can't really put nice fancy hotels out there. We got other spots in town that we can do things. Build a walkway on the other side of the street around that corner. You got that nice big little gravel plot. Go right there. There's a nice view right there. I feed the seagulls by hand off the dock every day that I go to work. By hand. I've worked on it every day since I started working for Randy. I got seagulls eating it from my hands, a half a dozen of them. Who can honestly say that they get to do that? Now, if I can get the seagulls to do that and we put, say, a little dock off the point, then there you go. You can have people come in and that would be their little treat from the town. But keep the uniqueness right there. I can't work on doing that if I don't have the dock right there for work. That's all I gotta say.
All right, thank you. Okay. Anyone else? All right, there's another opportunity at the end of the meeting for public comment. All right, council, approval of the agenda.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I would like to make an addition to the under business items. I can't remember. Do I make a motion?
Yes.
Okay. I would like to make a motion to add an item I. Under business items, to have a discussion about the selection process for our wayfinding system.
Of the election process?
The selection process.
Selection process.
For the wayfinding system.
Okay.
I thought there was going to be a presentation.
There is a presentation.
Oh, tonight?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
For the wayfinding.
I see. Okay.
Second. Okay, we have a motion. Second. Other discussions? All right, seeing no other discussion, all those in favor of adding aye, discussion of selection of the process for wayfinding signs. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay? That motion carries. So we've added I. Next.
Move to approve the agenda as amended.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any other comments? Any other comments? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the amended agenda, say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, say nay. That motion carries. Okay, we're moving on to item 4, consent agenda. What is your pleasure?
Move to approve the consent agenda as published.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as published. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda as published, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. That motion carries. Thank you. All right, we are on item 5, or no, yeah, we're on item 5, wayfinding signs. And Mr. Bond, could you lead us into this, please? Okay, we'll have a technical moment here.
Okay, thank you. Tonight, I'd like to introduce Ken Ambrosini of Ambrosini Designs. He's the owner of the firm, and he was selected from the city's professional services roster to assist in the...
Are you turned on?
I am, but it doesn't...
It's not picking up very well, is it?
I'm not sure.
Clerk Reinerson, do we have...
Here, let me try one of the others. Can you hear me? There we go.
There, that one sounds better, yeah.
Okay, I'll start over. Again, thank you. I'd like to introduce Mr. Ken Ambrosini. He's the owner of Ambrosini Designs, and that is the firm that was selected to execute the project to develop wayfinding signage and a system of wayfinding signs, as well as a logo which would be integrated in that sign and also used for other applications in the city. The project that we've been working on is about 5 or 6 months in the making now. The mayor appointed an advisory committee that helped steer this process and to go through a lot of work of refining different alternatives. And today we have a couple of alternatives that we'd like to present to you and also gain feedback from the city council on how you'd like to select from the 3 final alternatives that have been developed. But before we do that, I'd like to let Ken step up to the microphone and give an overview of how the process was conducted and how we arrived at our final alternatives. I should also point out you have a packet that was on your desk that was passed out this evening that outlines in the presentation. Thank you.
Welcome, and you're not a stranger to me. We've sat through several of your presentations, and thank you for coming to give us a presentation tonight. You have the floor.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. As Nick Bond mentioned, my name is Ken Ambrosini with Ambrosini Design, 1631 Northwest Thurman Street, Portland, Oregon. I've been working with the city now for 5.5, 6 months, developing a signage master plan for the city to be citywide, ultimately phased in as money is allocated over a period of years. As part of that scope of work, we were also tasked to develop a logo that would be part of this component. This will only be used for the wayfinding system. It's not a logo for the city government or any kind of official application. It'll be more for branding and marketing the community nationally, regionally, to visitors and tourists that might want to come to this region to experience Port Orchard and what it has to offer. I want to first go through the process a little bit for the audience as well as members who may not be as familiar with the design process as certainly I am, and the members of the steering committee and the mayor are now that we've been working on this process. So I'm just going to walk you through this quickly, if I can figure out how this works. The logo is the first component we're going to talk about. A logo is a distinctive symbol or an object. It's identifies a service, a person, a community, or an idea. And what is a logo? It seems like it's a simple question. It's typically something you see on your shoes, your automobile, or letterhead or stationery. Unfortunately, it's not that simple. A logo has multiple meanings, and there's a number of elements that make up a logo. There's word marks, symbols, and monograms. And a word mark is the direction that we are pursuing right now with the city because we feel that is the most valid element to use. A word mark uses the word or the name of the community to brand it. And the advantages is there's a proliferation of logos on the world right now with the and it's hard to identify one logo from another. And the word mark allows you to be distinctive from that because you're just using the name of your community. So Port Orchard is essentially the word mark or the logo. A symbol is an iconic element, and it works sometimes independently of a logo or word mark, or independent, like the Nike swoosh now is independent and you know what it is, but years ago it had the word Nike was associated with it. The advantage is it's simple, it's easy to remember, and there are fewer elements. The disadvantage is, unless it's a well-branded element, no one knows what it is, and it's not going to do your community any good or value in the long run. A monogram is typically letters that are joined together to create a mark. The disadvantage of a monogram is, in fact, that it's, unless you're, again, a branded element and people know who you are, it has no meaning to the public in general. So we've not pursued those two elements, the symbol or the monogram. Identity is a combination of the logo, the colors, and the visual components that make up the logo. It's not just a mark. And all these elements form a unique character that helps create the identity for the community. The identity is not a brand. Branding is a term that's used a lot these days. It's used particularly by everyone, and I don't think most people understand what branding is. We're not developing a brand here. We're developing an identity for the community to help market itself. And by marketing yourself, you'll start to create a brand. As people come to know Port Orchard, you'll help reinforce that brand. And through your other marketing efforts, through media, the web, those elements will form the brand ultimately, and that experience that people have when they visit this community. And this is just a joke on the right, but a logo is not a brand unless it's on a cow. 5 principles of effective logo design or design in general is it's simple, memorable, timeless, versatile, and appropriate. And these 5 principles we've pursued in the development of this new identity for the community. Logo process involves, as we practice it, is 8 steps, of which we are now in the concept development phase of this project. But people wonder why a logo is should be simple. It looks simple when it's completed. It looks like it's easy, but it's far from it. The design of a logo is one of the most complex design tasks a designer can take on because it's very much a polarizing element. People have opinions about any mark you design, and so it takes longer to solve a logo problem than it does to design a signage and wayfinding system, a marketing brochure, or any other design element that my firm might work with. But this is typically the steps that we proceed through, and what we do is in the brief, we hand out a design brief to the steering committee. We ask a series of questions about the community, the goals of the community, the history of the community, and then we do research on the history of the community, past, present, and future vision. We look at research on various communities around this area to see how they are marketing and branding themselves. Out of that research, we create a reference library of visual images. I personally drove every square inch, not every street, but every major street in Port Orchard a number of times to become familiar with the lay of the land and get a feel for the variety of architecture from the downtown to the newer areas like McCormick Woods and areas like that to the older neighborhoods, just to get a sense of the history from that standpoint of where it is today. And then we develop concepts. To get to this point now, we've made 5 presentations to the steering committee, and we've narrowed it down to 3 options. 3 options for the logo and 3 options for the signage and wayfinding program. And then what happens after we present these concepts, there's a period of reflection where we think about it. The best designs, I feel, are something you have to look at for a while. You don't want to make a rash decision on any logo or design. And then revisions will be made accordingly based upon comments. And then we'll do a final presentation, and then we have a deliverable, which will be electronic deliverable, which will be used for marketing and other branded elements. And the same, the signage program, the deliverable will be bid documents that be sent out for bidding to selected vendors. The design process, as we undertook it for this project, because Port Orchard is a unique community, And I will just say this, I live in Portland now, but I lived in Tacoma for a number of years. I was building boats there. I spent a lot of time in this area just looking around, so I was familiar with this area already just from those years of living in Tacoma. So I've always been attracted to this type of setting. It's a nice element. It hasn't been too refined. It hasn't been gentrified. It's a real community, but it still has a lot of elements to offer visitors, including the development of the waterfront, however that might take place, but access to the water. So we looked at Port Orchard as a waterfront community, primarily with a lot of land as well. Inspiration was gleaned from the water environment, the boating community, the waterfront history, and the historical nature of the architecture. We defined relevant stylistic characteristics, which is water, tides, motion of water, interaction with the shoreline, which I think is relevant, and reflections of light. The light here is quite striking as it changes throughout the year because this site is setting so beautifully on this hill with the view of the Olympics as well as the cross to Bremerton. And we established the criteria, which are these 5 principles, which I had previously mentioned. Keep this simple, memorable, timeless, versatile, and appropriate. In our research phase, we typically, designers need to work with visual tools, because that's what we are as visual people. We create image boards. So we photographed extensively the community and created image boards. And out of those image boards, we come up with icons, if you will. And these icons become elements which we can develop into a logo. We also looked at color palettes based upon these photos, because the palettes selected specifically for your community from the photographic survey. We didn't arbitrarily select colors or colorway and hues. They were all selected based upon coming to this community from over the 5-6 month period. I've seen the weather change dramatically, obviously. We have 2 primary color palettes right now which have been developed, and both of these, again, were developed based upon this photographic survey. The lower one, option 2, there's a brown component, and that's coming from weathered steel or Corten steel, and you're currently, my understanding is that you're building a pedestrian bridge, which is out of Corten steel, and this naturally rusts from marine air. It requires no painting, has a nice patina, and it reflects the color of the land in the surrounding community. And the blues and the grays come from actually the waterfront, particularly. And then the warmer hues of the green were taken during more summer and not been keyed up, obviously. Hue is much brighter. The first mark is taking the word Port Orchard as a single element, creating a clean topography. This typeface is Franklin Gothic. We've modified it. It was designed in 1930. It's still in extensive use today, hence the timeless component. We added the water component, if you will, within the type font itself for clarity. In designing this mark, I have to keep 2 things in the front of my mind at all times. It has to be readable from a vehicular speed, but it also has to work in a print application or a web application. But we certainly want people, when they pull into this community and pull off the highway, that they'll be able to read the sign clearly, they understand the context, and so the water has been integrated within the mark itself, and it's a single line of text. Option number 2, we took the word port and designed a custom script font for this. We use the same Franklin Gothic font for Orchard. We simplified the water component, which is integrated into the word orchard. And the port came from looking at the marine environment here and the hand painting that's traditionally completed on boats on the transom for the name of the boat, but also there's a lot of very handsome older signs in this community that I frankly love for the in the marine area particularly, and even in the shopping area that you don't see anymore. You see all these electronic signs, and these signs actually have heritage and history which are worth saving, and that's where the word port was derived from that element. Stacking this logo as well gives an emphasis to port and a second emphasis on orchard, but reading them, the port was representing, if you will, the water, and the orchard, obviously, the land, and the water's integrated into that component. And this, I think, works well in the signage as well because it's a consolidated message. The third option took the same font we just were talking about, the script font, as well as the primary, what's called a sans serif font for the word orchard, and integrated these water ribbon elements, again, reflecting the land and the water merging together, which I believe this community does well. And then we modified the type to reflect the fact that it's floating within that element. And also, I believe those ribbon elements have some energy, they're kind of forward-thinking, they can have some longevity to it and talk to the future a little bit in terms of a mark that'll have some legs, if you will, something that'll still look good in 10 years. As part of this, we've designed a number of elements to support the primary logo or logo type, and we use the compass rose as an element. These are two versions which we're currently developing still. And you'll see these in the signage package, how they might be integrated into the element as a layering effect. All visual elements need to have a layered component to them. They have the primary topography. In the signage, it'll be the message, which is the wayfinding and identification. But then it'll be the branded components, which will be these elements here, as well as the logo, which will reinforce the community at large. And so these pieces become part of that kit of parts, if you will, that'll be used throughout the system. The next drawings I'm going to talk about is the signage itself, which I mentioned we have three concepts which we've refined, but I first want to go quickly through the process of wayfinding, what wayfinding is and what wayfinding is not. Similar to branding, wayfinding is a term that a lot of people use today, and very few understand what it really means. The process of wayfinding is decision-making. Somebody has to formulate a plan when they see a sign and they come to a community. They have to decide, how am I going to get from here to there if they don't know the community? And decision executing, where they're going to make that decision and implement a plan. So that would be, in this case, coming off the highway to come into Port Orchard. How do I find the downtown? How do I find shops? How do I find venues such as parks, ball fields, any public venue? How do I find the waterfront? The first time I came in here, I had no idea how to get to downtown, frankly. And it wasn't intuitive to drive the way I did to come into this community. So if I have that problem, then I assure you other visitors do, because I'm trained to look for signage and clues like that. The process, it's the process individuals use to navigate unfamiliar surroundings. That's wayfinding. The term itself is, popularized, and I think wayfinding is not unto itself a solution to anything. Wayfinding is part of a bigger picture. So wayfinding is part of a signage and branding component. It's part of this logo. So the wayfinding is going to be the beginning, but this will have to be emphasized in how you market yourself through other applications and stuff. That'll be part of this overall element. What the wayfinding will do is start to define the boundaries of Port Orchard so people understand the size of the community, where it begins and ends, and they have a sense when they've arrived here. These elements will help to define that through color and the visual elements they create. A lot of people think of these, again, I was talking about this as just highway signs, but it's much greater than that, and that's what I'm talking about here by allowing visitors to see this in printed material, in visual material they'll receive online. It also should provide a seamless experience for the visitor. There's nothing worse than someone who comes into a community, they start to find their way, and then there's nothing to support that. People don't want to be stressed out when they're visiting someplace. They want to be able to find parking easily, find out where pedestrian paths are, find food and shopping. The first thing we always are asked to do when we do any kind of public space is people are asking where are public restrooms. Simple things like that people are looking for. And whether that's going to be directly into a venue such as Starbucks or another food venue in town, these are part of elements that the signage system ultimately should accomplish to address the needs of the users. The objectives for this project were to define the community boundaries, as I was just talking about, give attention to community businesses and venues, and take into account WashDOT roadway signs and how these signs will complement and reinforce signs that are already in play here and how this new system will work within that context. The goals are to promote the City of Port Orchard, emphasize the City of Port Orchard as a destination, and simplify and emphasize the sense of place. I mean, What we want to do is reinforce this city's sense of place, what it is, and how it fits it within this region. Promote the market and key attractions. Enhance the urban design landscape. If we're going to put signs up, we want them to be appropriate, we want them to look good and not look like more visual clutter in your street. We want to clean the street up as much as possible. Make visitors' experience memorable. And that memorable part is if they can find where they want to go easily, they can navigate. That'll increase that. For a dog park or water, they want to be able to find it rapidly. Enhance safety and reduce sign proliferation, visual clutter. That's what I'm talking about. Too many signs is actually worse than having no signs. And improve traffic flow. Again, if people know where they're going, you pick up traffic speeds to a reasonable speed and people can find their way easily. The benefits, wayfinding system, reduce stress and frustration, influence brand perception, and this reinforces that brand component, saves time for users, certainly new residents as well as visitors, improve visitor accessibility to any public venues or shopping, contributes to the visitor empowerment. If they can solve the problem themselves, they feel empowered and they feel comfortable coming to the community. Enhance safety and reduce sign proliferation, I didn't mention that, and make visitor experience more memorable, ultimately. The first of the signs, we've taken each of these logos and applied them, and I apologize, there's boards out in the lobby as well as you have printout. The colors here are very washed out. But the intent here is to have a palette that's appropriate with a neutral tone, such as behind the word Port Orchard, which is a warmer gray, and then blue tones that represent the primary logo component. The two options here for the primary identifier or gateway sign are curved in form, which is reinforcing that water movement or flow. They're also suggesting direction inward towards the site, which is, in this case, the city. The top element is showing this compass rose integrated into a concrete pylon, if you will. This would be tone on tone, so it would not be color, it would be just more shadow. The word Port Orchard can either be illuminated, we haven't made the final decision on this, internally illuminated or face illuminated. And then we've added a component such as welcome to Port Orchard, some sort of greeting component to this right now. The option 2 below that, I've taken an element, a nautical element that's from a gas-rig sailboat and modified it slightly, obviously. But the idea was some nautical component for the pole, rather than having a single pole, it would have a reference to the waterfront. Again, the idea of taking the logo or the water element and pulling it through the other signage components. And then taking these flags, again, influenced from the nautical environment, coastal environment, if you will, inland water in this case. And those are not banners, they're hardened metal, so they have kinetic motion to them, they'll move with the wind, but there won't be any maintenance. Typically, all these signs, materials would be low maintenance in some marine environment. I recommend that all be aluminum, a powder coat paint finish, which will stand up to this marine environment. So if these are properly produced, they should last for 20 to 30 years with no maintenance at all. And even if they're damaged, the aluminum will not rust, it'll just oxidize. The secondary signs or smaller gateway element would be, as you get into the city proper, a smaller vehicular sign to identify the downtown. Again, it's finished on both sides because you'll be able to visually see this sign from both sides from a vehicular standpoint as well as pedestrian. Incorporating the compass rose element as well as the color family. And then a secondary or third level signage component which would be used in public park venues to identify these elements as part of Port Orchard's community. Primary signage that most likely to be implemented in phase 1 would be primary pedestrian wayfinding. And these are freestanding elements that would be distributed throughout the community, which would identify parking and primary venues and public spaces, including library, as well as hospital, et cetera. It would direct people, as well as residents, new residents of the community, how to find their way effectively around the community. The nice thing about a branded system like this is once people are familiar with the color family, they know to look for that family to continue their path of travel. You don't have to oversign a system, but you have to have enough signs that people can see from a distance and know that there's a element coming up for them. So these would function both from a vehicular standpoint as well as a pedestrian standpoint. The next family, option 2, similar attitude, different, this is logo option number 2. Again, a curved element. These are, again, aluminum panels formed. They'll be integrated landscape into ultimately the landscape setting. Obviously, I would not propose these as freestanding in space. They need to be integrated into their final environment. And this just shows a darker palette. Again, the gray came from looking at some of the photos I had taken near the waterfront, the warm gray, which is the primary background color, and then a darker blue for port, and integrated that color into the word orchard as well.
It's just these two.
Secondary signs, again, the city sign as you get into the city proper, the parks identifier. These are freestanding signs at entry points only. And then the pedestrian signs, similar concept where these would be double-sided signs in all cases. So they have messages on side A and B, and they allow us to, again, direct people in a multitude of directions. My professional experience is that each sign should really have no more than 4 lines of information, or it's too much information for someone to perceive and make a decision on. So in the case where we have a lot of information, it's better to break it down into more panels. And the third option is using the weathered steel or Corten steel as a brand name. That's what the darker brown element is in the background. And painted aluminum panels in the front. Showing the third option of the logo. And the option on the left, upper left, is a pylon type sign, good visibility from a distance. And then a more of a monument sign, which is a linear type of sign, which would be used if we had a more linear application. And we are in a process called programming, where we're identifying all locations within the community where these signs would ultimately be placed in a master plan format, which means we've located them, but we don't know ultimately what the streetscape will be like as it's built out or finished before these signs are built out. The secondary directional signs, and then some smaller directional signs, which again, I would develop these for whichever family we select as you move through the community. Parks identifier, and then the freestanding pedestrian directional signs. I've shown here a pedestrian kiosk, which is our scope of work, which would have a mapping component, when typically these would only be in the downtown area. They would be on the pedestrian or near a pedestrian walkway or path. And these elements, again, would have a map that shows you the community, the venues that are throughout the community, as well as it can post public events in these elements. And then it'd have a directional component above that. And we've shown that the compass rose being a graphic component as well on top of this piece. That's the complete presentation on the signage and wayfinding. If you have any questions at this time, what I plan on doing is posting this, letting the public weigh in on the directions here. And that's from that, based upon the comments from the council and the public, we will complete our task of taking this to the next level and complete the project before the end of this year. Thank you.
Ken, am I correct in understanding that the 3 marks can go into any one of the designs?
That is correct. I've actually tried it, and I'm comfortable that any of the marks designed would work on any of the signs selected. So I don't have a preference at this time. I believe they are all strong. They all read well, and I think that they have the timeless quality that will benefit the community. So it'll be a matter of just the form and function of the actual sign. And then how we'll wrap this up is once we make a selection, then we will make recommendations on price points where we can design these pieces, so we are not wasting your money or the taxpayers' money. We'll put the money where we need to, and will not spend excess money where we don't need to. So the monument signs, we'll need to spend a little more money to do those properly. Those are gateway pieces, but as we get through the system, we can simplify the system and reduce the cost dramatically.
Could you give me an idea of the scale of the pedestrian sign? I know on one of the sheets it says like 1/4 inch equals 1 foot or something, but Like the two there, are they about 2 to 3 feet high and about 1.5 feet wide, or?
They're approximately 30 inches wide and probably, I don't remember the exact height on that.
36, 48 maybe?
Probably, yeah.
Okay.
I usually will not go over 30 inches, 24 to 30 because of the wind load, which especially on a marine coastal area like this, we wouldn't want to have large blades sticking up there because then we're going to have to over-design the structure to support them. But what mandates ultimately the size of the sign is the amount of messages we have. So my recommendation is the messages I have currently were, there was a study produced here a few years ago by intern who programmed all the locations, and I've been vetting that to see how valid it is. And these are all the elements that were called out that, in terms of venues and destinations. So ultimately, we'll have to make that decision. The rule of thumb is a 1/4 inch readability per 10 feet. So right now, the size is minimum what I believe would work well from a vehicular standpoint at 25 to 30 miles an hour and from a pedestrian standpoint. And the height is still variable. I typically like to have these a little higher because of vandalism. We don't want to have your signs tagged every week, and then the maintenance is going to be complaining about having to clean them off. But typically, 7'6" to 8 foot to the bottom of the sign is all standard, up to 9 feet is the minimum.
Mr. Childs, you had a question?
Yeah, Ken, when you started, I think you kind of explained this, but I think I didn't quite catch it. Now, these logo graphics, which are basic kind of universal compass roses that we've seen, you know, if you go online, you can find them. They're not necessarily for the letterhead or other stuff. They're just for wayfaring signs, right?
They're just for the wayfinding system. It's probably hard to see in this rendering here, but you can see on that left sign with the park that's where it would be utilized. It was also the idea that it could be embedded in concrete walkway. You could do a stamp pattern at an intersection. There's also the idea that if there's a decision point on a pathway or a bike path, you can use that as a wayfinding component. So it really was meant just to be used in the signage, not in the branding or the identity element.
And my next question is the color palette. The city's already in some ways moved a little bit towards the green signs, green benches, but I didn't see much green in the color palette. I assume the committee has kind of been juggling that thought and what we've already started versus what you're proposing. How do you put that together?
Yeah, we've explored extensive color palettes, and I presented a number of color options, including definitely green was an element. And we've arrived at this point based upon the steering committee and the presentations I made. Doesn't mean we can't revisit that. I mean, certainly the work has already been executed. I have no problem with the green. I think green does work, but I still think that blue is the primary color. Green is a positive color. I mean, green represents growth. It's a positive color, but blue is also a positive color. Neither one of them have negative connotations culturally or from a graphic standpoint. So and they also work well together visually. So I'd like to combine, if we have to, or we feel that's an obligation, that I would say the land and the water, that relationship of the green, the natural setting, because obviously, as you know, this area is blessed with abundance of color because of the watershed, obviously.
And Brandy, was she not here? She's back there, I'm sorry. The packet of stuff I got didn't match the stuff you had. And I don't know why that is. I don't know if it doesn't fit. A lot of the written stuff I
Let me
don't
apologize.
have.
Yeah, I consolidated because there was too much writing, and I just felt it was not worth projecting all of that writing. So I tried to edit it down for this presentation. I have turned this presentation over to Nick in a PDF form, which he can distribute to you.
Okay.
The exact presentation I have here tonight, so that can be delivered to you.
Okay, because if we're going to mull this over for a couple of weeks, having everything you put on the screen tonight would be nice.
Yeah, I apologize. I also added the description of wayfinding because I felt that probably you hadn't, since all of you hadn't attended these meetings, you didn't probably have the same insight that the committee had. So again, that has been turned over tonight to Nick Bond.
And finally, I like your presentation. I find signs and wayfaring signs really positive for a community. I notice them when you go to other communities. especially the waterfront, and you kind of drive through and you see these signs and different things. It generates excitement and like you've arrived someplace. I have to say I haven't been too fond of the way the price tag has moved from place to place, but if we get a great product, I really will be happy, and I thank you for your presentation.
Well, thank you. Again, in design, I always feel we want to solve the problem from a design standpoint first, and we can always make the money work. If we don't solve the design problem, there's no point talking money. If we have a defined budget, we can meet it. I'm also a licensed general contractor, and I build a lot of my work, so I'm very familiar with this environment and understand what the public expects from a system like this. And if we're going to implement a comprehensive system like this, we want it to last and be good value. We certainly don't want to be putting it in and having you dealing with maintenance. So I guarantee that whatever we ultimately select, you'll be satisfied with the final result.
Okay.
Quick
Mr.
question
Chang.
about readability. Do you feel the reverse type would be readable at night as well as day?
The best readability for type is a dark background with light type. And what I'm specifying in these signs, which you're obviously not going to be aware of here at this point, is the type is what's called 3M reflective vinyl. It's the same system that the highway system uses. WashDOT uses it. The only difference is they use what's called an engineering grade, which is excessively expensive and doesn't reflect any more light than the 3M reflective. And so I use the white reflective and the black reflective vinyl, and any car headlights or any ambient light, the type will glow nicely. Now, that's not going to happen on the Port Orchard because that's a custom color, but any of the white type you see will read very clearly at night with low light conditions.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I don't see any other questions at the moment. Appreciate it. Nick, are we?
Yeah, we'll discuss this later on the agenda. I'll step outside and talk to the consultant real quick.
Okay.
But we can go to the next item.
All right. Let's go. Find my place here. We're going to go ahead and continue the public hearing on ordinance amending Port Orchard Municipal Code 1306 Storm Drainage Utility. Mr. Dorsey, would you bring us up to speed on
Thank
this?
you, Your Honor, council members. On August 26, 2014, the first public hearing on the adoption of an ordinance amending Port Orchard Municipal Code 13.06 was held. Council requested the topic be revisited at a later meeting. Staff is representing the presentation given at the council work study on May 20th, 2014. At the June 24th meeting, staff was directed to prepare the ordinance for a rate increase of $14 per month per impervious surface unit, or ISU, with the understanding that the extra money above the recommended step increase would be applied toward a capital improvement program. In 2015, this would dedicate $4.30 per ISU per month towards capital improvements, and in 2016, it would dedicate 80 cents per ISU per month. During the 2-year period, with the current number of ISUs in the accounting system, this would collect about $603,309.60 for the capital improvement program. The second public hearing was duly noticed. Staff recommends that the mayor open the second public hearing for the adoption of the ordinance amending Port Orchard Municipal Code 13.06 Storm Drainage Utility. And Andrea, the Assistant City Engineer, Stormwater Manager, has a presentation.
Okay, we are going to go ahead and open the second public hearing. And Andrea, would you go ahead and give us your presentation, please?
As soon as the screen warms up, we'll get going.
Okay, let's be sure you have your mics right close. Your voice is kind of... We'll test it in just a moment. She's got two mics there. Yes.
Will this work? Or do I need to get louder?
Need to speak as loud as you possibly can, I think.
Okay, here we go. Okay.
Excuse me, I think that the way that this was worded may be a little confusing.
because it says for a rate increase of $14 per month. And what it is an additional $7 per month to the rate that already exists. So I'm just saying the wording may be misleading. It would end up being $14 per month, but it sounds like an additional $14 per month the way it's worded. Is that correct?
It's going to $14 per month.
Right.
Yes. This is a presentation with little snippets out of what was presented to you at the May work study when we brought the gap analysis forward to begin this discussion. So there are a couple of new slides that have been slid in to add to that and augment where we have arrived at today. But basically, the rate increase is to pay for the current or new permit, which would allow us to have staffing, resources, equipment, and the funding review that we've completed, a capital improvement program, and a stormwater management plan. This is what our current staffing levels look like in the storm drainage utility as it exists today at $7 per month, and all of the different elements that we do compliance in. This is our current organizational chart as it exists as well. This is what the new NPDES, or National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permit, has brought in with it this time around. We have a new target audience for public education. We are currently working through the process to identify where we will be going with that process. We are going to need to update our illicit discharge detection and elimination ordinance. We have to start implementing more field screenings and the associated trainings with staff in-house for that as well. We have several sections of code that will have to be identified as well as revised to include the mandatory low-impact development that will take effect in December of 2016, as well as a new manual at that same time as well. Treatment and flow control facility inspections frequency will need to be increased. We also now have a fecal coliform bacteria total maximum daily load requirement on both Sinclair Dyes Inlet and 3 creeks within the city limits. Stormwater monitoring is another piece that was mandatory under this permit. We've opted to pay Ecology to do that portion of the permit for us. The new permit schedule looks like this. It's basically broken out during the 5-year period that this permit will be active. These are the various sections of the permit that we are required to comply with. Each X marks when a component will need to be completed and submitted to Ecology in order to meet permit compliance. The summary of the gap analysis brought forward the fact that you have your existing program under column heading Roman numeral 1 and the future program under Roman numeral number 2, and it has identified that there's several different elements that will need to increase due to the newer requirements within the permit. This is what the proposed org chart out of that would look like, picking up staffing so that we'll be able to do a lot of the work basically in-house. This is the capital improvement program list that has been identified to date when this was processed. We continue to look at different areas of the city as we hear from our citizens and various other people to look at other areas that we might need to include on lists going forward to look for improvements. This is the SDP, or Site Development Plan, funding analysis, which shows the annual revenue needs, the role of the capital projects, the new equipment and staffing, the current or new NPDES permit, and the current rate of $7 per month. New additional costs would total to $736,000. This is the slide that shows in 2009, when this utility was set up at $7 per month, we had 760 catch basins, 8.4 miles of pipeline, 12 ponds, and 1 vault that the city was required to maintain under that permit at that time. As of today, we are currently sitting at 1,395 catch basins, 21.5 miles of pipeline, 38 ponds, and 1 vault that staff is required to maintain to meet permit compliance. This is the slide that showed the local utility rate survey, which shows where Port Orchard fits within jurisdictions of very similar sizes throughout the Puget Sound region. As you can see, we tend to be towards the lower end on the left. Burlington and Linden are really the only two that are lower than us on our rates at this point.
Isn't that Paulsbo data dated at $9.50? Didn't they just rise to 16?
That's based on the current rate back in May. That does not take into account the pieces that have made it into the paper recently on their rate increases. They are proposing a rate increase simultaneously as we are. The new staffing or site stormwater development program funding levels would look more along these lines to meet regulatory compliance in the blue block, the local needs in the green, and the program administration in the lower section in purple. And this is the slide that shows basically at $7 per month, we bring in $828,072 in revenue. With the $14 per month, that's what the revenue would look like, and it would add $603,310 into a capital improvement program. If we were to do the step increases, we would be making our estimated annual revenues at those levels instead. And that's basically not capital improvement program at all until 2017. Do you have any questions on the presentation?
Jeez, I got a bunch of them. Well, right there, the 14 is that we just dumped to 14, or we could step it up, right? Is that what we're doing?
That's why the two pieces are there. I inserted the row with the 2015 proposed rate based on the discussions that have gone on over the summer.
Okay, but if we want to just step it up, then it would be those other numbers.
Yes.
Then we wouldn't get there as fast.
You would not get there as fast, and you would not be able to do capital improvement projects, so we would not be able to address really the capital improvement program for the $10 million that we've identified for need until 2017.
Okay, so let me ask about the capital improvement program. I'm sure everybody in here is probably wondering, of all those things on the list, is there anything you could just say, well, you know, that's pretty expensive, we can't really do that right now, and we'll just pull that out? Or are they all going to line up with some kind of enforcement thing that ecology is going to say you've got to do that? Or I mean, how many of them are critical, say? Can you pull that slide back up? I think that for the audience to understand this, and before we start throwing snowballs, we need to, you know, kind of make sure that we all understand the same things.
I think the discussion we were having was to jump to the 14 would allow us to fund the capital project potentially to solve the flooding problems in illicit discharge in the downtown core.
But what I want to know is on these here now, some that are just plain critical and you just could not pass those up, or any that if we were saying we're going to have to try and do the $9, then the $11, and they whatever, that they would go to the side until we could get up to a higher level. I'm just wondering how we're. I heard what Rob said, but I'm just wondering. I'm sure people are wondering this, so I'm just asking it.
Basically, the projects starting at about number 4 on that list have all been identified through citizen complaints and various areas that we have identified during heavy rainfalls and various other problems. There are areas that we know that we have a lot of difficulties in within the city, and it's very difficult to point out that one ranks higher than another. It's kind of like picking your favorite child. And but the first project on the list, Ruby Creek Crossing, is actually a joint water crossing because it actually has a water line within our water utility that is attached to that project. So that's why it ranked the highest, was the need to keep the water system up and running. The Port Orchard Boulevard, if we had to, we could move that down a little bit on the priority. The decant facility was actually the application on your consent agenda tonight. If we are successful on that application, that one would be one that would be funded through quite possibly grant. And then we would get to item number 4 on the list, which is Arnold Creek. Arnold Creek, or actually your downtown, because your downtown does draw a lot of revenue for the city, might be an area to focus on.
Mr. Cartwright.
Usually when we get grants, what's the local match?
25%.
So that $600,000 would get us how much in total project funding?
Basically, the decant facility would definitely be funded out of that without a problem, but if I have to, there are some areas that I can, if we have the staffing, do some work in-house to help mitigate that match money and allow more of that $600,000 to go to another project.
But in general, the 600 would be about 2.4 million in capital improvement, with 600 being the local and the rest being in grant, if all things being equal.
In all things being equal.
Right, that's assuming, I mean, that the grant programs continue. What success we have. I mean, we applied for a downtown, we had a tech team to look at the downtown flooding, and we thought that would score highly. And as it turned out, it didn't, because the funding that we were looking at that was available was a water quality-based funding. And even though we thought there was a huge water quality component in this, it was basically kicked out because they weren't looking at flood control. So to make a general statement on the capital improvements, we've prioritized them the best we can. We've identified what we've identified over our 6 years here, and then what was on the books previously. A year from now, there may be another issue. I mean, the West Street issue wasn't our issue until a few years ago, when it became evident that it was our issue, and then it became a capital improvement program. So it's a bit of a moving target, and this is the best snapshot that we have. And I think everything on this list, to answer Councilman Child's question, is I think everything on this list is valid. There are some that it's matching money to some degree. I mean, if we got a certain size grant and we could only look at number 9, because that's what like the decant facility is number 3. Right now, that's our best opportunity to get funding. So we're gonna try to take projects off with grants that we can get, but that project list is a little bit in flux.
Mr. Dorsey, wouldn't you say it's kind of a slippery slope to say we have X amount of dollars and that would cover so much grant money, because the grant money isn't always available to us in any form?
Right. We're trying to set up this utility based on being, functioning in the red and providing capital improvement dollars. Any grant funding that we get is a bonus, but we try not to depend on grants, just like we try not to depend on, connection charges, for example, on the water and the sewer utilities, to operate in the red, because if the economy takes a turn, then you're not operating the utility. So we're trying to be conservative.
Okay, thank you. More questions?
How fast do we have to spend the money as it comes in?
It wouldn't have to be spent necessarily right away. It's something where we could put the money from 1 year in an account that would be a set aside for capital improvement only, if that's where it's going. And then the next year, as that money comes in, if that would be enough to do a project, then at that time we would do that project.
That's the question I was going to ask you. Capital improvement only. I mean, it's earmarked. It can't be spent for salaries or other things.
No, once it goes into our budgetary process as a capital improvement fund, it comes out for a capital improvement project.
I mean, there's still the operational side of the proposed rate increase and the capital side. So there's still the operational compliance piece.
If I understand correctly, the 970 that was initially proposed funded compliance only in 2015, correct?
Correct.
And that is the bare minimum we have to do.
Yes.
Or we're subject to fine by ecology.
We go back
Hopefully
to
it
that
stops
last
with
slide.
ecology.
Is it ecology?
Ecology, but EPA oversees ecology, and it's ultimately a federal mandate.
Unfunded federal mandate.
Slide that had the breakout of the different rates.
Yes.
There we are.
So that 970 saves nothing or puts nothing to capital at all. It's
No.
compliance only, just like our $7 is currently doing.
only on our NPDES permit in 2015, and that will be bare bones compliance as well.
Mr. Cartwright.
So if I recall the previous conversation that we had as a council when we looked at this originally on the gap analysis, my recollection is we knew we were going to get to 1320 by 2016 no matter what, just to meet compliance with nothing for capital improvement. And that's why the recommendation of going to 14 now, which would provide that extra money in 15 and another 80 cents in 16 was made. And even at that, beyond 16, there would be nothing for any capital improvement until we get to the $16 rate in 17. So even at $14 now, it appears to me this council will be having this discussion again for a rate increase sometime in 17 or beyond, if not before.
I'm just.
Okay. Shall we hear from the public?
Oh, great.
All right. I have a sign-up list here. Mr. Swan, could you please come up, give us your comments?
Mayor Mathis and council members, my name is Jeffrey Swan, president of Evergreen Lumber here in Port Orchard, 1325 Lloyd Parkway. The nature of my business, I require a very large parcel, and unfortunately for me, the bulk of it is impervious. When I developed the property in 1995, I was required by the city of Port Orchard to put in a stormwater system, and it was relatively expensive. It was around $100,000. I have underground storage, retention, culvert, and a water cleansing system. The system does a couple things, as I understand it. One, it stores the water. If we have a hard rain, it stores the water so it doesn't go off the property in a very large amount. It does it in a timely manner. And secondly, it cleans the water. So when it leaves my property, it's clean. Your proposed stormwater fee is going to have a tremendous impact on my business. In 2014, my cost was $5,712 just for the stormwater fees. In addition to that...
Is that a month, Jeff? Or
Pardon?
Is that a year, month? What is that?
That's an annual cost to me,
okay.
$5,712. In addition to that, I'm required by the city to have my stormwater system cleaned, checked, make sure it's working properly on an annual basis. And in 2014, that cost $952. So if your proposed fee of doubling my costs go through, I'm going to be spending close to $12,500 a year. And then I'm assuming that my fees to check the system and clean the system won't be static, that they will continue to go up also. I would think that because of the costs that a company like mine has to go through when I'm developing the property, what I pay up front for a stormwater system, and then what I have to pay to have that maintained on an annual basis, that somehow you can mitigate the cost of an increase for a company like mine. And there are a few companies like mine in the city of Port Orchard that this is going to impact substantially. So in my mind, it's an unfair burden to a business like mine to double the fee that I have. And unfortunately, it's not, contrary to popular belief, I cannot pass my costs on to my customers. I'm in a very competitive business, and it's something that I have to eat up. I have to absorb myself. So my request is that you find some way to mitigate the fact that I've spent a substantial amount of funds up front for a stormwater system, and I know that I need to pay fees
on an ongoing basis, but I don't feel that it's fair to double my fees with the dollar amount that I'm already paying. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, our next sign up, Mr. Cray, please.
Good evening, members of the council, Mr. Mayor. I'll keep my presentation as brief as possible, and you'll also hear directly from my clients this evening, who will also keep their presentations as brief as possible. I represent Gil and Kathy Michael, who are located at 228 Seattle Avenue here in Port Orchard. And we recognize that an increase in the rate per ISU is needed. However, we feel that raising it from $7 to $14 in one fell swoop immediately is too much, too soon, particularly in light of our economy, which is just now beginning to recover. And it hasn't even got anywhere near where it was before the Great Recession, with a capital G and a capital R, please. We also support some kind of program for assistance for low-income and fixed-income members of our community. We don't see any of that in the proposal this evening. We also support a credit system for people who have already expended substantial amounts of money. The previous speaker, Mr. Swan, explained that in his situation to obtain the approvals to build what he has. My clients have done the same thing. We have spent money. We have an on-site mitigation system for our stormwater runoff, and there's no credit or recognition whatsoever in the proposal for those systems that have already been bought and paid for and require continued maintenance. We think that that's an essential element going forward. We are also concerned about the specifics of the implementation of the Port Orchard Municipal Code 13.06 going forward. Our concern is that the requirement of having a business license to operate a home business in the city of Port Orchard should not, repeat, not be used as the basis to require a residence to be reclassified from residence to commercial and increase the number of ISUs as a result of that reclassification to more than one. This is not something theoretical, please, ladies and gentlemen. The letter that I've submitted to the City Council and to the Mayor and to the staff, Mr. Dorsey and others, has attached to it the letter from the utility specifically doing exactly what I just said. The presence of a business license has caused the property to be reclassified from residential to commercial, and the number of ISUs increased from 1 to 4, which results in 4 times the rate per month. And if the rate's now doubled, it becomes even more serious of an economic impact upon that business. We don't believe that's appropriate or the way the law should become. However, if that's what's going to happen, then we believe the existence of a business license where you're talking about a home business, if that's going to trigger a reclassification from residential to commercial, then it has to be, that's going to happen to every single home business in this community, because they must all be treated the same. I pause for a moment because when you think about that, I believe that that was not at all the intention of the city when it implemented and adopted the business license requirement for home-based businesses in the city of Port Orchard. That requirement was installed so that the city would know the names and addresses and the locations of those businesses for police, fire protection, those kinds of things, not as a triggering device for a reclassification of property from residential to commercial. It is, in fact, ladies and gentlemen, a classic example of an unintended consequence. We talk about unintended consequences literally every day in our society. It's throughout the news, and it's one of the things that when we see it, you have the opportunity now to stop it, and we believe that you should. The kinds of small businesses that permeate the city of Port Orchard are all kinds of things. Artists, barbers, beauticians, bed and breakfasts like my clients, commercial cosmetic sales, daycare centers, grant writers, insurance agents, even lawyers. Pet grooming, tutors, website designers, wedding coordinators, and dozens more. All kinds of small businesses that add to the character and fabric of our society, operating out of their homes. That shouldn't be what is the basis for what we're talking about here. If those operations are considered for utility purposes as commercial, that could lead to all kinds of other increases and all kinds of further unintended consequences. The properties may be looked upon as commercial by lenders rather than residential, meaning a whole different set of rules and analysis for those people to obtain refinancing loans. Buying and selling those properties may become more difficult. Taxes may increase. Again, all kinds of unintended consequences may flow from this. In reviewing the record, there's the quote in it from Councilman Patansu on June 14th at the Utility Committee meeting, where he stated, quote, "I just don't want to kill this industry in our community." And ladies and gentlemen, that's what this is about. So often we hear in our society, and you read it in the press all the time, well, this is only a small increase, and this is only a small increase. I've been a commercial lawyer in this community within 2 blocks of this new building for 37 years, starting over on 720 Prospect Street in 1976, moving to 600 Kitsap Street in 1983. And I can assure you that I've seen businesses fail and go into bankruptcy, shut down, not be able to open up or operate. They don't fail from one event. They fail from a series of small events that have a cumulative effect that turn the bottom line from positive to negative, and no matter what that small business person does, no matter how many hours they work, no matter how many things they try to cut, they can't make it. That's a tragedy, and it should not be in our society. Now, we've got a couple of suggestions, and I put them in my letter, that in terms of defining commercial, replacing the word "or" with the word "and," where it would be all property zoned commercial and used for commercial, retail, industrial, or community purposes. That's a win-win. It solves the problem because the home-based businesses are not, that we're talking about, are residential based. They're not in commercial zones. In the alternative, all residentially zoned properties with a business license, if the city council wants to go in that direction, will be treated as a residential account with one ISU applied to it if the holder of the business license resides on the property. Because again, that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about home-based businesses where the people who hold the business license reside on the property that's used for the business purpose. I'd like to introduce at this point one of my clients, Kathy Michael, who will have a very brief presentation. Thank you. If you have any questions, I can answer them now if you wish, however.
Questions? Questions? We may have some before.
Absolutely. I can retake the podium at any time. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Kathy Michael will now speak.
Council members, Mr. Mayor. It is certainly understood in order to implement required programs, rate increases often become the solution. I thought staff merely was looking for ways to equitably support increased revenue to the city. After listening to both the June and the July Utilities Committee meeting, and now actually receiving an increase in our fees billing notice, it appears I may have been incorrect. We do not understand how having a business license could possibly be used to change the zoning designation when the use is a residentially zoned use. What does a business license have to do with generating more runoff or less, or making a property commercial? Nothing, absolutely nothing. Council decisions must be based on accurate information and not mischaracterizations, and this record must be set straight. Councilman Cartwright, your questions and concerns expressed at the Utilities Committee meeting were and are important. They are actually critical. You were looking for facts to base your decision on. You're correct, a multiple of 5 is significant. I'm sure you and all council members know this, but want to reassure you, all and this community, we are not a Les Schwab, a mini market, or a hotel. We're not a convenience store or a 7-unit townhouse, and we don't have 2 kitchens, or many of the other distractions staff has inaccurately depicted the property as. Distractions, yes, as none of those things have anything to do with impervious surface. The concern is these distractions could impact a council member's decision unless you know the truth. None of these things create 1 single square inch of impervious surface, or 1 more. Nor does the fact that we have a business license have anything to do with impervious surface. It truly has nothing to do with impervious surface or making us commercial. And there should be huge concerns, as it has and is being used as a ruse to do something no one ever intended it to do. Our roof on the inn is approximately 2,400 square feet to the drip line. It must be clearly comprehended and understood. The portion of a multi-story house that sits under the roof has no impact on ISUs. Only the roof counts, not what is under the roof, nor whether it has 2 bedrooms or 7. One other fact all must be aware of regarding our property is in the process of salvaging this significant 1909 historic home, Larry Currell's city engineer required us to mitigate additional impervious surface created in the restoration process. The additional 1,900 square feet, plus or minus, of deck and carport was, and is fully mitigated by our installation of a stormwater infiltration system. This is fully documented in our file, and staff failed to include this in their information to council. We have actively mitigated stormwater for over 12 years and strongly encourage the city to join the county to implement stormwater solutions. Council members, one and all, it is your responsibility to ensure small businesses don't get put out of business. As Councilmember Patonsu so clearly articulated in the June Utilities Committee meeting, I don't want to kill these businesses in our community. Please do not let the word or the use of the word "or" now create an antagonistic environment between the city council members, and residential in-home business owners who generate revenue into this city. Let the community come together with you. The process for starting this sits in this room, with many who have already indicated they are on board with rain gardens, etc. Our access to this information is a mere 2 blocks away, with the county already having this in place, and I'm certain they would gladly come alongside the city to make this happen. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Michael.
Council, mayor, staff, and citizens.
Mr. Cray and Ms. Michael have clearly articulated the issues surrounding using a business license to designate a property commercial and the consequences of doing so. I would like to add a few supporting items to their statements. We are single-family residents in a residential zone. The city comprehensive plan, the city zoning map, and the county assessor specifically designate us as such. Port Orchard Municipal Code, POMC, defines bed and breakfast as being owner-occupied dwelling units. A dwelling unit is defined in the POMC as containing kitchen facilities, lavatory, closet, and rooms with internal accessibility. A bedroom is not a dwelling unit, as has been claimed by staff. POMC 16.30.080, the residential land use table, does not permit single-family residences in commercial zones. Bed and breakfast are permitted in a residential zone with a conditional use permit. We were required to get a conditional use permit for the bed and breakfast. By this action, the city already made the determination that we were and are residential. If the city had thought of us at any time as commercial, they would have just issued us a business license and called it good. We had to go through the conditional use permit, so the city has always thought of us as residential. Just because we have a business license does not make us or any other residential holder in this city of a business license commercial. It doesn't. I am respectfully asking the council to make the change in the definition of commercial in POMC 13.06.00060, subparagraph 2, as Mr. Cray requested. As he said, this small change clarifies the definition of commercial, keeps residentially zoned properties with less than 4 dwelling units as residential accounts, and eliminates unintended consequences for business license holders. That was the end of what I had initially wanted to say tonight. Something's come up that is, as Ms. Michael said, we have been doing for 12 years. It is very dear to my heart to put the stormwater that came off when we did our remodel back into the ground. We spent a significant sum at the time to do that. There are no criteria or no methods in the proposed changes to this ordinance or that are incorporated in this ordinance to allow for mitigation credits. The county will give an individual or a property owner who mitigates their property up to half of their expenses up to $1,000. Bremerton, if I recall the actual term they use, issues credits for both the quantity and quality of their stormwater that they mitigate. These opportunities for us to participate in these programs are 2 blocks away and a short foot ferry ride across to Bremerton City Hall. I would encourage the council to ask staff or direct staff, whichever way you do this, to include those as quickly as possible in their stormwater mitigation program. Thank you very much. Are there any questions?
Any questions? Mr. Chang.
Was there any explanation of the calculations of your property going from 1 to, is it 5?
We received a billing from the Treasurer's Department. Actually, the utility billing was how it was signed, raising the rate on the bed and breakfast, which is 228 Seattle Avenue, from one ISU to 4 ISUs. And I will answer your question, Fred, but I have to explain this first. We have, since the implementation of the stormwater program, paid 1 ISU on the original house and 1 ISU on the accessory dwelling unit that we added on to the house. So we've paid 2 ISUs since the implementation of the program. Okay. Staff determined that we had over 14,566 square feet of impervious surface on the parcel. The code says that that measurement is for the parcel. The breakout of that was done at the behest of the Treasurer's Department, and I support that. We've been doing that all along. There are no specific numbers listing how that was calculated. We sent a public record, actually my attorney did, and we have not gotten that back yet. So we don't know how they were individually calculated, what was roof, driveway, etc. All we have is the gross number, not the individual net numbers, or how it's broken out between the two different buildings. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
I just wanted to know that there was math behind going from 1 to 4. And it sounds like there is.
There is, but we don't know what it is. We've asked for it.
That's 2 to 4.
Any other question?
Well, did you go from 2 to 4 or 2 to 5?
We went from 2 to 5.
2 to 5.
Total
okay.
units.
Okay.
Mr. Childs, did you have a question?
Well, I was trying to follow, because I know that when Mr. Craig was talking, he was talking about you would be going from 1 to 4. Now I'm kind of confused.
Okay. The original house is the bed and breakfast portion. That goes from 1 to 4 units. The carriage house unit goes from 1 to 2 units. No, it goes from 1 unit, but the increase doubles. You know, the increase doubles the price from 7 to 14.
So that's
So
where you get the
the
fifth.
original number for the parcel is 2, and it goes to 5.
Okay, I get it.
The business, the
Three
bed
more on
and
the
breakfast goes from 1 to 4.
3 more on the original house, and the
Correct, 3 more.
carriage house stays the same.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, sir.
Mr. Cartwright, you had your hand up.
I'm trying to follow all of this because I'm a little bit confused. Mark, did we not have a presentation, a work study session on bed and breakfast comparisons for local jurisdictions? And we had a discussion on raising the ISUs for bed and breakfasts, specifically just to bed and breakfasts.
Right.
Separate from this, I mean.
Right. The issue that the city's dealing with right now is we have 3 separate issues. We have the storm rate conversation, which we've had meetings at the utility committee meeting, we've had work study, we've had 2 presentations here. Then we had this issue that came out of the utility building department on the bed and breakfast issue that then was brought to utility committee through the utility billing, saying we need to look at the 3 bed and breakfasts in the city. And we had that presentation.
That work study?
That work study.
Okay.
And then we had the 3rd issue, which was the in-home business, which was, to use Attorney Cray's conversation, unintended consequence of the conversation that had to do with the bed and breakfast. And so we know that utility billing had a statement on the bed and breakfast issue, utility billing, that basically alluded to if you have a business license. I don't really know where that wording came from, and I agree with everybody that we need to look at that wording, because that isn't what the city had decided to do. That wasn't a decision. But there's also other documentation that was sent out that we looked at today in our code that kind of contradicts that statement on the bed and breakfast issue, that it actually has to do with a home business doesn't make you commercial.
Correct.
You can have a home-based business, and unless you have a conditional use permit, that may trigger if there's activity on the property. And so I guess I agree that we have the rate discussion, which is separate from the bed and breakfast discussion. which is separate from maybe going in and changing some language in our code, because there is some vagueness and unintended consequence that we really need to look at these home-based businesses, because it's never been staff's intention, or I think the utility committee's intention, or the council's intention, to have a home-based business, just to the fact that they have a business license, somehow be treated commercially. That's never been the intention.
We were dealing with multiple issues at the utility committee meeting. The only one that this public hearing and this process is supposed to be dealing with is the rate discussion. The other issues, there are other issues that we probably need to resolve here related to the code and what the discussion that happened that we had a work study separately, but they're separate issues than what we're intending to deal with here this evening, which is the rate discussion.
And I wanted to verify that it was my understanding that for somebody that has a 1,400 square foot home and cuts hair, we weren't talking as that as doubling to the commercial rate or whatever. They were going to stay at the residential rate.
It's been a completely different conversation and topic than what's here before us. And I agree with Mr. Cree's statement that the verbiage isn't very good here in the code, and we probably need to deal with this at the utility committee and bring it forward. I mean, it's great that this was brought forward, but that isn't what we're here supposed to be discussing here this evening.
Thank you.
So one more then.
Yes, sir.
This doesn't sound as complicated as I thought it was.
No.
There's 3 bed and breakfasts in the city,
Yes.
and what you're talking about is you don't want to be classified as a commercial establishment because it makes you go from 2 to 5. And it's the verbiage that you're talking about that does that.
That's a separate issue. The bed and breakfast issue from the utility committee, and we dealt with it it was presented at our work study session, how we researched, and that's where my comment came from at the utility committee meeting, is we don't want to put this industry out of business. And we asked, how are other municipalities treating the bed and breakfast industry? And other than Kitsap County, we surveyed from Gig Harbor to Sequim, the other municipalities are treating them as a bed and breakfast, as a commercial enterprise, and it's based on the number, square footage, to determine each ISU.
I apologize for the interruption, but that was not the case. It was not all 6. As a matter of fact, several did not get reports back.
There was others that did not report.
Townsend, as opposed to 2 blocks away to the county, to use the most egregious form.
Well, to follow up on what Councilmember Cartwright said, I do remember the work study discussion. I don't remember council taking any action if this was a change in interpretation. It did sound like bed and breakfast were being singled out for this alone of all the home-based businesses from that meeting. I wasn't sure, I didn't know if we needed to vote on it as a council or if it was just considered an interpretation. It was presented at work study, but I don't believe there was any action.
Nothing's come forward yet on the bed and breakfast issue, correct? There was no action taken.
Well, no, but I am concerned that we're already raising rates on an individual despite no action being taken. That seems a little odd to me, and just the timing.
Can we, just a point of order, and can we complete the public input and then have our discussion?
Yeah, absolutely.
We still have another sign up. Yeah, we better move on with.
Okay, I do want, okay, Mr. Dorsey brought something up, Mr. Kansu's brought it up, Mr. Cartwright's brought it up, and Mr. Mr. Chang has brought it up. We received a stormwater drainage utility account work order. And on that work order, it says, this is a bed and breakfast and needs to be assessed as a commercial property due to the fact that they are required to have a business license. I will not get into this trying to change the tax assessor property class that is going to be used to assess our property as commercial now. We received this letter from the Utility Billing Committee, which I think each one of you received a copy of it. This implements this document. This makes this and your discussions a matter of fact and real, and it will impact us starting November 1st. What we are asking is to make a simple change in the definition of commercial in POMC 13.06.060, subparagraph 2. If you are directing staff to take a look at this issue, Mr. Ponce, since you're chair of the Utilities Committee, then I would ask that the billing that was directed by the Utility Committee or the Utility Billing Department be held in abeyance until not only your direction to them is completed, but that all other residential properties that have a billing license, as directed by this document, be measured by staff. I think that's enough. I don't want to carry it on anymore like Ms. Ashby. That I be quiet. Thank you.
All right,
Are there any
thank
questions? Any
you.
more questions?
Ms. Whittleton.
Good evening. I'm going to have to reformat what I was going to say because most everyone has pretty much said it already. I've brought it before you before that I'm concerned. I hold a business license and I work out of one room in my home. I understand we need to raise our stormwater rates, but I cannot back that until I know where we stand as home-based business and license holders. And I tried to share with you the verbiage that had concerned me, and I had poor audio last time. And so I sent you emails, and I transcribed the exact verbiage, the location, why I was motivated to be concerned. And so I've taken just some short parts of that to help you understand where we're coming from, or where I'm coming from. This is from the utility meeting, and it was June 20th, minute 14. And this was a quote from our Assistant City Engineer, Andrea Archer, concerning, how we assess. The quote is, "The thing is, the way the code is set up and the way that we handle the accounts is, if you have a business license, and even if it is a home-based business, you are technically commercial. And so we go out and we assess based on your impervious surface units. Most cases, a single-family residence, if they are doing a home-based business, will not see a change because most of them are within 3,000 square feet." End of quote. Then we move on. Minute 17:45. "No, we do a single-family residence as just a flat rate right now. Commercial is based on impervious surface area, and so if you are doing a commercial business where you are having income, then we value that as commercial at this time. Home-based businesses are also billed as commercial." Now, the requirement is that you have to be over 3,000 square feet of impervious surface, but we have that. We have that, and we have a business license. Our neighbor has that, and they don't have a business license. And the problem is that I stand to be assessed double what they're paying. And I implore you to change the verbiage before we go ahead with this rate increase. And my preference right now would be to do the incremental one because we don't know where we stand. When I went to the other meeting with the gap analysis, we've got a whole big other thing coming down the pike, and we really need to know what the blanket charge is going to be. So I encourage you to take baby steps so we see what the full picture is. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, that's the end of our sign-up sheet, but once again, if you didn't sign up, that's okay. Raise your hand, be identified, come up and make a comment. Yes, ma'am. Not on this subject, she hasn't.
Jerry Harmon. I guess that I'm sitting here and I'm thinking we're adding another layer of government with the KRCC, but I think all of you have got to bond with all of the communities that have this issue affecting them. And this needs to be negotiated with the federal government, because if I understand what was said at one meeting not too long ago, this $14 is going to increase to about $220 within a 6-year period per month per resident. That's a lot of money. I'm thinking, will I even be able to afford to live in my home at that point if I'm expected to pay almost $3,000 a year just for stormwater? And just think what these other people that have talked to you about. I also think that if people do something on their property to mitigate the stormwater, that should be credited somehow. But I think the number one issue is this is something that is affecting a lot of smaller communities, and it's going to kill us if there isn't something from the federal government that says they are going to help support and pay for this, because it's unfunded and we can't just keep taking on this. We pay a lot of taxes as it is. Somehow they need to get that money back to us to help pay for all of this that they are sending us. And so we need to have some negotiations with all of our legislators to say, hey, you are killing us with these types of laws that are unfunded. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Anyone else? Yes, please.
Dana Harmon, Kitsap Street.
Could you pull the mic up, please? Thank you.
Dana Harmon, 824 Kitsap Street. Just as an audience member listening to what has been presented to all of you this evening, I implore you to think rationally and with the intent of keeping your community alive and well. To me, there are two businessmen, and I'm sure there's many other businessmen in this community that have already paid Port Orchard permitting fees and expended tremendous amount of money to mitigate stormwater issues on their property. And it seems to me that the request from the attorney is very viable, that you have some kind of mitigation for people who have already addressed the stormwater issue. And then for all of those businesses, commercial businesses that have not met the requirements, then have fees for them. But don't put these fees on small businesses and commercial entities that have already met the standards at the time that they developed their property. This is very unfair.
Thank you. Okay. Anyone else? Last chance? Pardon me? Okay. I close the public hearing. Thank you. Yes.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to, it's 9 o'clock, and I would like us to take a short break before we start our deliberation on this.
Okay. Everybody in agreement? Okay. 10 minutes. Or actually, let's take a break until a quarter after.
5 minutes.
5 minutes? All right. 10 after.
We're not going to deliberate on this right away.
Yeah, you're not going to deliberate on this
At
anyway.
all, are we?
No, not that I know